Okay, now, whereas public interest groups try and lobby in favor of trying to secure policies that went over collective goods, private interest groups lobby in favor of policies that are going to go ahead and secure private goods. Well, what do I mean by a private good? Well, if you think about what a collective good is, that everybody benefits, not just members of the group, you can probably reason out what a private good is. A private good is a benefit that just some people enjoy, but others don't. So they benefit some people, but not others. Usually people who are involved with the interest group in particular. So for example, corporations and businesses oftentimes have lobbyists. And those lobbyists will go ahead and argue or try and influence policymakers to adopt policies that are going to help those businesses. So if I'm a business that's involved in oil exploration, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try and influence policymakers, lobby policymakers to adopt policies that are going to go ahead and help people in my industry. And if I succeed, let's say in getting a tax break, that tax break is going to come to me. If you're a plumber, if you're a butcher, if you're a student, you're not going to get that benefit. It's not like everybody's going to get the benefit. My group, my organization is going to get it, and that's what makes it a private good. The same thing, if labor unions are going ahead and they're trying to lobby policymakers to get a better pension, to get more worker protections or things like that, if they succeed, not everybody goes ahead and benefits. The people who benefit are the people who belong to the labor union. If they're working for better rights for union workers and I'm a non-union worker, I don't get any benefit from it. A private good, just it's a benefits some people, but not others. And then professional organizations oftentimes go ahead and they have lobbyists who try and get things done. For example, you probably didn't know this. It used to be the case that in order to call yourself a doctor, a medical doctor, all you needed to do was hang a sign on your door that said, Doctor, Dr. Phil. All you have to do is hang a shingle on the door. You say, hey, I'm a doctor. People come and go, Doctor, I'm sick. Right? Well, in the early years of medicine, that basically flew by. There'd be some people who actually understood medicine to some extent and some people who didn't. But as the medical profession started to develop, the people who had actually studied medicine and who understood medicine, at least to the extent they did back then, said, you know what, these people, you shouldn't just be able to nail something on the door saying, I'm a doctor. You should have to go ahead and get a certain amount of schooling. You should have to demonstrate a certain level of competence, go to school and take a degree or intern with somebody or something like that. And so eventually what they did was they were able to lobby the government to set a rule that in order to go ahead and to call yourself a doctor, you needed to go ahead and you needed to go to medical school, you needed to pass some exams, you needed to work as an intern, and then you can call yourself a doctor and treat people on your own. Now, why did doctors want to do that? Well, one reason is that there were some quacks out there who were doing a terrible job and probably doing more harm than good. But the other reason is that when you go ahead and you say, okay, now in order to become a doctor, you have to go to the school, you have to pay for the school, then you have to pass the school, then you have to be an intern. It becomes more, are there going to be more doctors or fewer doctors once you set up those new rules? Well, there are going to be fewer doctors. And if there are fewer doctors, what happens to the cost of doctors? It goes up. You're going to make more money as a doctor if it's harder for people to call themselves doctors because there's only going to be a few of them. So this is what private interest groups do. They try and secure things that are going to benefit some people, in the example I gave you, doctors, but not others. Now, there's a real close connection between sort of what interest groups and policymakers, and they're frequently sort of working hand in hand with one another. And for the most part, when you hear people talk about lobbyists or interest groups, It's very negative. It's very negative. And I'm not trying to brush that aside. That's actually something that's very true and something to be concerned about, that lobbyists and interest groups are going ahead and giving policymakers campaign donations, for example, in order for, and then asking lawmakers to pass laws that may not be good for the country, may just be good for the lobbyists and the interest group. So we'll talk about that more in a second. But one of the things that I want to stress is the way in which interest groups are actually quite good and quite helpful. So we'll get to that in 1 second. The idea here is that, like I say, most people have a sort of negative view of lobbyists. What I'm trying to do is present the flip side of both lobbyists and, more importantly, interest groups. That interest groups actually can be quite helpful in the legislative process. Not that there's not problems with them, but they can be quite helpful. So with that in mind, what do interest groups have that policymakers need? You can see I have 3 things listed. The first answer starts off with an M. What is it that they need? Hopefully you said money, because that's the easy one. Money. Policymakers need money. Especially if you're an elected official, what you need is you need to run for re-election over and over again. And to do that, you need money. And interest groups have money. They'll donate to your campaign if you vote correctly, meaning you vote the way that they want you to vote. They'll donate money to your campaign. And so elected officials in particular have a very strong reason to want to go ahead and vote the way interest groups want them to vote. Now keep in mind that for every interest group that wants you to vote yes, there's probably somebody who wants you to vote no, right? And so you can get money no matter what you do. But there are certain interest groups that have a lot of money. Oil companies have a lot of money. Trial lawyers have a lot of money. Oil companies, did I mention that? Certain groups have a boatload of money. And so there's a concern that policymakers are inclined to go ahead and vote for the policies that these kind of interest groups are interested in rather than what's best for the population. So money's the first thing. The second thing interest groups have that policymakers need is, starts with an M, manpower. Manpower. Well, what do I mean by that? When elections come around, as they do quite frequently, one of the things that really helps a candidate is to go ahead and have people who can be out on election day knocking on doors. It's called canvassing. Canvassing. C-A-N-V-A-S-S-I-N-G. Canvassing. So let me tell you what I'm talking about. On election day, for example, suppose I'm the representative from Santa Clarita Valley, and I voted in favor of a bill that your organization really likes. So what I do is I say, hey, look, you know what? I voted for those bills that you really like. I need you to help me on election day. You're like, cool, no problem, dude. We'll go ahead and we'll get our people. So you go ahead and you tell all your people, come on out and be where Phil's going to be meeting on election day, like to my district office or something like that. So all the people from your organization, the pioneers of Santa Clarita Valley, you guys are interested in clean water. And I passed a bill that helped get clean water. And so you tell your members, hey, Phil's going ahead and running for re-election. Come out on election day and help him, and let's show our support. Then what you do is your organization shows up there with 15, 20 people. And I give them addresses of all the people in the neighborhood. And on the addresses, what they can do is they can look and they can see whether or not the people at each address are Democrats or Republicans. Let's say for the purposes of this example, I'm a Republican. So what I do is I give out all these different address lists to the people in your organization. And what you guys do is you take it and you walk down the street and you look at the address, go, oh, that's a Republican. You knock on there, you just say, hi there, I'm whatever your name is, insert your name here. I'm from Pioneers of Santa Clarita Valley. I just want to know whether or not you voted today. And then they say, no, not yet. Well, I just wanted to remind you to get out there and vote for Phil Gusson because, he's done this and this and this. Just wanted to remind you, okay? So thank you very much, right? Then they walk away and they write down, hasn't voted yet. They go to the next house. They look, oh, it's a Democrat. Don't knock on that door. because you don't want to remind Democrats to vote because they're just going to vote against me. So you go ahead and you go to the next door. It's a Republican. You knock on the door. You say, "Hi there. My name is so and so from the Pioneers of Santa Clarita Valley," and you start talking. They go, "I already voted. I voted absentee ballot." And you say, "Do you remember if you voted for or against Phil Gusson?" They tell you. You write it down, and you go to the next house, and you just keep knocking on doors. And then when you're done, what you do is you go back to the beginning, and you go back to that first house that you went to, and you knock on the door and say, "Hey there, I was here earlier today. Did you have a chance to vote yet?" And they're like, "Oh man, I'm so glad you reminded me. I completely forgot." Or they say, "No, I haven't been able to because, I couldn't get a ride down there. My buddy was going to give me a ride, but he got arrested for a DUI, and so now I can't do it." And you go, "Hey, you know what? I'll give you a lift down there." You do whatever you can to get them out. Manpower. Get people out on the ground on election day, getting people to the polls so that they go ahead and vote. Interest groups can do that. Interest groups have a whole bunch of people that can get a whole bunch of people and come and help out an elected official on election day. And that winds up being really important because one of the big ways that you win these kind of elections is getting your people out to vote. And so that's why they can also be really valuable. But the most important thing I want to talk about what interest groups have that policymakers need is the thing next. It starts with an I, and it's going to be at the beginning of the next video, which is going to be interest groups 0.03, and that'll give you a chance to try and figure out what I is.